Good morning to our guests in Brazil and good evening to our guests in India. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this highly pivotal and topical session on how to expand your business into the Brazilian market. I extend a warm welcome to our esteemed panelists for this session as I introduce them to you. So before I do that, I would like to inform everyone that Mr. Leonardo Ananda, Honorary Consul General of India in Rio de Janeiro, and President of the India-Brazil Chamber of Commerce, was expected to give the keynote address today. But due to some personal exigency, he's been unable to attend and has expressed his regret. On his behalf, our session will be led by Ms. Natalia Rodrigues, Commercial and Institutional Relationship Manager, India-Brazil Chamber of Commerce. Ms. Natalia is graduated in International Relations by PUC-MG and has great international experience studying, working, and traveling abroad. She speaks 4 languages and has also experience in project planning, management, events organization, development of strategic partnerships, and market intelligence related tasks, organizing business missions to India since 2018. Ms. Natalia is Commercial Institutional Manager at India-Brazil Chamber of Commerce in Minas Gerais, leading the operations of the chamber in this region and also participating in projects across Brazil and India. Next in the order of speakers is Mr. Ashok Sethi, Director TPCI. With a domestic and international exposure spanning over the last 4 decades, Mr. Sethi has been at the helm of affairs in India and Middle East with leading and globally recognized brands such as Pepsi Cola in the Middle East and Iran, KRBL India, which has the brand famous brand India Gate Rice, and Best Foods Limited. For the last 5 years, he has been associated with Trade Promotion Council of India and has been instrumental in securing sound footprints of the organization in the Middle East. His professional mantras that he lives by are to lead by example, coach with authenticity, and achieve goals collectively to grow as a team and an organization. Mr. Graziano Messana, Managing Partner of GM Venture. Graziano has a consolidated experience in startup processes, business management, negotiation, and M&A processes. After graduating economy with honors from Lewis University in Rome, he started working in investment banking in Luxembourg with focus on the private equity industry. From there, he returned to Italy in 2002. Over the last 15 years, he and his team have managed over 50 investments of various multinational and foreign companies in Brazil, acting as interim CFO, general manager, board member, as well as advisor. He's a frequent speaker in international events dealing with Brazil and has participated as a professor in the MBA program. Mr. Adler Martins, legal advisor to the India-Brazil Chamber of Commerce, is a lawyer with 15 years of experience in international law, taxation, and foreign investments. He has experience working in negotiations in China, India, Mexico, USA, Argentina, Dubai, and England. Mr. Adler is also secretary to the International Law Committee of the Minas Gerais OAB, founder of the Study Group on International Trade Law at UFMG. He has represented UFMG at Swiss Arbitration Moot in Austria. He participated in the Defense Commission of the Prerogatives of the Minas Gerais OAB and is Professor of International Contracts and International Tax Law at CEDIN, CEDIN, He served as Professor of the subject International Contracts at the CAD postgraduate course in Universidad Gama Filho. Now, coming to a brief context of the session, over the years, Brazil has emerged as a key business partner for India and Latin America and Caribbean region. Indo-Brazil bilateral trade was recorded at around $7 billion in 2020. They have elevated their relationship to a strategic partnership in 2006 and a strong collaboration at bilateral, plurilateral, and multilateral forums. I'm sorry, including the BRICS, IPSA, G20, UN, and WTO. As rapidly developing economies with similar aspirations and values, they have the potential to take their collaboration even further in the coming years. Brazil has around $6 billion of investments stocked from India, particularly in sectors such as IT, pharma, energy, agribusiness, mining, engineering, auto. Private sectors in both countries are playing a catalytic role in driving their growth stories. Post-pandemic, Brazil is expected to be among the fastest recovering economies in the G20 with a growth projection of 5.2% by the OECD. Sao Paulo alone is estimated around $600 billion plus, therefore making it larger than some of the other countries. Also, Brazil is a window to the larger Latin American and Caribbean economy, which is estimated at around $5.8 trillion if you look at 2019 estimates. So in our previous session on India-Brazil relations, we identified that despite these significant synergies and potential, Indian investment in Brazil is not able to pick up as expected due to certain challenges. A prominent roadblock in this regard is the lack of awareness of Indian companies on the investment environment, policies, and potential. Excuse me. Distance and language are considered the two most critical concerns. Lack of awareness and interest obviously generates a high degree of circumspection and may be a major factor diverting attention to other destinations. But considering the kind of success that some Indian companies have already achieved in Brazil, we firmly believe that it's time for a change in this err on the side of caution approach and have a more realistic view of what this economy offers. This webinar is a step in that direction from our perspective. We look forward to an engaging and thought-provoking discussion to enlighten audiences on the best business expansion strategies in Brazil with our esteemed panelists from India-Brazil Chamber of Commerce, GM Venture, and TPCI. We encourage our audience to bring forward the issues and concerns which we will try to address as far as possible in the Q&A session, considering our time constraints. Now, I will request Ms. Natalia Rodriguez to open the session, please. Over to you, Natalia.
Thank you, Mr. Virat. Thank you very much. Namaste. Good morning to Brazil. Good afternoon to India. It is a great pleasure to be here with all of you today. On behalf of Mr. Leonardo Ananda, I would like to say he regrets he's not able to join today. He was looking forward to be here today with us. And he unfortunately had a last minute issue, but he sent his personal regards to our friends here, Mr. Ashok, Mr. Graziano, Mr. Virat, Mr. Adley. Thank you very much for making this event possible. It is a great pleasure to count with your partnership and participation. And I would like to start welcoming everyone that is here with us today. We were really looking forward to this event because we believe this is one of the topics discussing how to expand your business to the Brazilian market, and demystifying the Brazilian market to Indian companies is a fundamental step to bring the India and the Brazilian markets closer. And I would like to thank you very much, TPCI, represented here today by Mr. Ashok Seth and Mr. Virat Bari, for taking this idea forward with us and helping to reach more Indian companies, and for the partnership that we have been always developing. And thank you very much, Mr. Graziano Messana, for bringing us the idea and the proposal of this event. GM Venture is an associate company of the India-Brazil Chamber of Commerce, and it is an honor for us to count with GM Venture as an associate. So thank you, Mr. Graziano, for bringing the idea to us. It's a brilliant idea, and we in fact want to do it on the other side as well. Later on, after the success of this event today, we want to also talk to Brazilian companies on how to expand their business to India, because we believe this dialogue is, as I said, is fundamental to keep fomenting the bilateral relations between India and Brazil. And I'm not going to take much of our time today. We have much more content to hear. I just would like to take the opportunity to put the India-Brazil Chamber of Commerce at everyone's disposal, because what we do is help India and Brazilian companies to do business in many different ways, understanding the needs of each company. So it would be a pleasure to assist your company that is here with us today, talking to the Indian companies that are interested in the Brazilian market. It will be a pleasure for us to assist. So please do reach out to us. Our team is looking forward to bring more Indian companies to the Brazilian market, and also help the Brazilian companies in India as well. So I take the opportunity to put the India-Brazil Chamber at your disposal. So thank you very much once again for being with us here today. And I pass it over to Mr. Virat once again. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalia, for your remarks. I would now request Mr. Graziano Messana, Managing Partner of GM Venture, to give his opening remarks, please.
Okay. Namaste. Thank you very much, Mr. Vidat. I quickly take the opportunity to greet Natalia. Thank you for your words, and of course, Leonardo, and all the India Brasilia Chamber of Commerce team, Mr. Ashok, Director of TPCI, and all your team at TPCI that has worked with the Chamber so hard on this event. Also, I acknowledge Mr. Adel Martins, who will help us technically, sharing some details after my speech. And firstly, I would like to share my experience very quickly here in Brazil. I'm a European economist, and I moved to Brazil in 2006 when I founded GM Venture with the purpose to help foreign investors here. During these 15 years of activities, we have launched from scratch, the whole startup project, or we bought already existing companies, accounting for more than 50 successful cases with a common denominator: foreign company that wanted to take the opportunity in Brazil. So we act as a one-stop shop solution, and we are able to investigate if there is a market here, if the proposed business model works, or we need to improve and tropicalize the idea. So we explain all tax administrative requirements, and when the project starts, we take care of all the need that the foreign investor has here to start to managing the day-by-day activities at his local branch. Financial management, accounting, HR matters, that's it. So try to imagine a kind of outsourced CFO here in Brazil. So Mr. Virat, I think that for the moment, that's it. I will be happy to share shortly my presentation and talk more about Brazil. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Messana. I now request Mr. Ashok Sethi, Director, Trade Promotion Council of India, to talk about the current Indian presence in Brazil and what kind of opportunities and some issues which the industry has been talking about with respect to Brazil.
Thank you very much, Virat. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, sir, you're audible, perfectly audible.
Excellent. Respected panelists, Mr. Leonardo Ananda in absentia, we're going to miss him. Madam Natalia, Mr. Messana, Mr. Adril, and my colleague, Mr. Virat Bari. At the onset, would like to thank Mr. Leonardo and Madam Natalia for retaining a historical MOU with TPCI and being instrumental in reviving a strong bond this year post-pandemic. Mr. Leonardo's recent visit to India and our review meeting in Taj Hotel on the 8th of last month laid the stepping stone to an immediate action plan, which we started implementing to a stronger collaboration way forward to the Indo-Brazil business opportunity. Let's talk about the Brazil-India investment scenario. Now, Brazil is emerging as an attractive destination for Indian investors and presents huge potentials for South India's biggest country, that is India. Brazil, South America's largest economy, as Bari has been talking about, I just repeat it very quickly, has a stock of over 6 billion of Indian investment. It's a large country, rich in natural and human resources, with a diversified economy, the 9th largest in the world. Brazil attracts $73.5 billion of foreign direct investments last year. Infrastructure stands as a key area of profitable investment. Let's take a snapshot at the trade. Bilateral trade between India and Brazil has been robust over the past years. Yes, as mentioned, the trade declined by 4% from 6.87 billion in 2020, from 7.16 billion in 2019 to 6.87 billion dollars in 2020, which is a decline of 4%. However, the government has, of both economies, committed to expand bilateral trades to a robust 15 billion, but looks like 222, but looks like because of the pandemic, these numbers would have to be revised. Would like to mention that there's increased interest for bilateral investment opportunities between both the economies in areas which need to be highlighted, like electrical manufacturing, biofuels, aerospace, defense, pharmaceuticals, and information technology. Indian businesses have already invested in sectors like IT, mining, infrastructures, energy, which offer high potential for growth. The government of both the economies have emphasized the importance of expanding the India-Mercosur Preferential Trade Agreement. This can be done by increasing the coverage of products and reducing tariffs in order to further grow the bilateral trade between both economies. And recent progress has been made on this front of PTA. Would like to mention Brazil's top exporting products which have potential to India: petroleum, oil and oil from bituminous minerals, maize, bleached chemicals, wood, pulp, soda, sulfate, coffee, medium oils and preparations. Now, these are some of the products which can be tapped into immediate by both the countries to increase the bilateral trade between them in the next 2 to 3 years. I would like to mention here the potential. Now, what is this? Brazil's share of India's imports from the world is only 1.8%. And Brazil's share of exports to India versus exports to the world is only 3%. So you can see the sort of potential which sits like a sitting duck. Now, how do we go ahead? You know, we have got a feedback from the industry which talks about the concerns which are there on day to day. And therefore, what I'm trying to do is go a little micro so that we understand where are the challenges and how we overcome them. So, for example, stringent labor laws in Brazil, the local laws are such that they inhibit any mergers and acquisitions activities in the country. Example, acquiring companies are liable to compensate employees for any wrong done by the earlier promoter also for the last 10 to 12 years. Now, this is information which I have gathered, and I do respect that our outsourced CFO would please throw light on this. Now, even the employees who resign can file cases against the company, and acquiring companies will be liable to pay. These stringent and unlimited liability clauses discourages organic and inorganic growth by Indian companies in Brazil. So we need to address this. Visa issues in general, the feedback is not encouraging from the Brazilian side. Now, I understand that Indian companies are making investments into Brazil and hiring around 90% local personnel for their operations in Brazil, but are facing huge problems if they are required to send senior resource persons to manage large investments, and visas is an issue. Also, we understand that, you know, the major issue being faced with Brazil is legalization of birth certificates and marriage certificates if married, which are, documents required as and when a guy goes there. This process takes 3 to 6 months depending on where the certificate was issued, and therefore the visa gets goes backwards. The legalization process is very cumbersome. It may be examined if it is possible to do away with this process, as NASSCOM, the National Association of Software and Service Company, has stated that countries like US, UK, Australia do not follow this process of legalization anymore. After submission of documents before the Brazil Home Ministry, the lead time to issue the approval is taking 4 to 6 weeks. This cycle needs to be reduced. Now, both India and Brazil are leading emerging economies, and therefore many companies are looking at making investments into Brazil. But these roadblocks are hindrances for the industry. So, with the request to take this up very strongly on your side. Let's talk about the landscape for investment in Brazil. Brazil is one of the biggest FDI receivers in the world, is an attractive market for international investors due to several factors: domestic market of nearly 210 million inhabitants, availability of easily exploitable raw materials, and a strategic geographic position that allows easy access to other South American countries. However, investment in Brazil remains risky because of some negative factors, as stated earlier, which must be addressed. And we, the Indian side, definitely need a clarity on this. As part of the country's ongoing efforts to strengthen its business environment, good news is Brazil introduced electronic certificates of origin, which reduce the time required for importing documents, facilitation and simplifying the whole process. The country also made several infrastructure concessions which have helped foster investments. The current administration, we understand, has plans for further improving the business environment in the country, implementing reforms such as decreasing the number of days needed to create a company in Brazil from 80 to around 30 days. Easing of regulations in subsectors and potential amendments to tax systems should also help us. Now, let's look at the opportunities of investment. On the agri front, we have key sectors: sugarcane, coffee, oranges. You talk of it: bananas, walnuts, cashews, nuts, pineapple, peppers, beef, poultry, tobacco leaves. Look at this range: aluminium, mineral ores, iron. The country is increasingly asserting itself in aeronautics, pharmacy, automobiles, iron and steel, and chemical sectors, in addition to those products mentioned earlier. Moreover, the Brazilian government launched an investment program for infrastructure development. Opportunities do exist, notably at the development of airports and more generally in the public-private partnership targeting infrastructure development, such as one of the names we know of is Projeto Brasilia. Thanks to the growth of the middle-class investors, the franchising sector is booming in Brazil, we understand. In July 2019, the economy liberally announced by Brazil that a privatization program, the largest in the world in terms of the number of companies to be privatized, which promises to reduce the number of state-owned companies from 134 to just 12. This is information we have received. Well, I have thrown light on some of the sectorial products which we believe can be tapped immediately to increase the bilateral trade, hopefully in the next couple of years. Indeed, let's pray that the pandemic blows away soon and we get back to a business between two excellent, willing and friendly nations. Needless to say that TPCI would be ready to participate on an agreed format to enhance mutual trade. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sethi sir. Now I will request Mr. Messana to kindly make his presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I will try to share here the presentation, and I would like to remember that it will be available after this event, so everybody should receive this presentation by email, so we can go faster. As Mr. Ashok already said something, can you check with you if you are is available the presentation on the screen? Mr. Virat, it's okay?
Yes, yes, it's visible.
Perfect.
It's absolutely visible.
I will spend 20 minutes and I will divide into part my presentations. First of all, we'll talk about macroeconomics in Brazil and opportunity. Okay, I will try to not repeat concept that Mr. Ashok already spoke. And the second part is how to do business in a complex market. It's a typical mistake to avoid. So first of all, Brazilian image abroad is worst than reality, and since I have been living here for 15 years, I can say that, and it's not depending from the right or left leader in power. Why? It's a country with a continental dimension. India is about 2.6 times smaller than Brazil, but we have here one language. Of course, is a country with a big population, but you know that India's population is a lot larger. We have different background coexist peacefully. It's a democracy. Brazil is the only country in the world that has a 100% electronic election, and the system it works since 1996. Is a country where the technology is very welcome and early adopter. And in these slides, I just wrote some information. I mean, that foreign investors need to know, but you can read after, is the list of which commodity Brazil produce and export. It's the most important economy in Latin America. Here in this chart, we can see in green the GDP of Brazil that alone is stronger, is greater than Latin America GDP combined of the other countries. Also, in terms of GDP, Brazil is in the top 10 or top 12, but of course, in terms of value, India is more or less the double. And nevertheless, if we look at the GDP per capita, Brazil perform better. In terms of foreign direct investment, we already understood that Brazil is able to attract foreign investment. It's a good country. USA, China, and some countries from Europe like Germany, Italy, France are invested a lot here. And the exchange rate nowadays, the $1 to 5.5 reais, of course, is favoring foreign investment. But where the foreigners invested here in Brazil? On the left, we can see the cluster. So in the last 5 years, we can see ITC and electronics, agribusiness, environmental technology, transport, industrial, and so on. And on the right, more or less the same thing, the top 10 in world FDI sector for projects. So again, we have software IT, we see chemicals, chemicals, communication, and business service as main sectors. Brazil have a strong position in US dollar, means that we have here big reserve in dollar. It's not Argentina, so it's the safest country in Latin America, and is able to exit quickly from crisis. In this chart, we can see the crisis of 2008, global crisis, okay? In this second moment, 2015, 2016, we can see the crisis is a kind of domestic crisis. Again, Brazil jump out from the crisis, and now we have the last moment, pandemic, global crisis, and GDP for this year is around 5%, right? About the economic temperature, we had more than 300 operations private equity realized in 2020, the year of pandemic. We had 1,500 M&A operation in 2020, and the double 3,000 into 2021. As well, we had a boom of IPO in 2020. I mean, 27 company is listed in the stock exchange. And this year, again, a boom, 38 IPO. We had 38 IPOs and counting. In terms of recovery, Brazil GDP surged back to pre-pandemic level, and this is the opportunity to spend some word about the pandemic in Brazil, about COVID. Brazil has never had a real lockdown, so we don't talk here if it's right or wrong, but the current situation is that over 276 million vaccines have been already applied, and 57% of people is fully vaccinated. In this chart, we can see the situation in USA and the situation in Brazil. That means that we are in the same boat right now, but of course, Brazil were late to the party. But now we have the same share of population fully vaccinated. Some Indian investing in Brazil, I don't want to spend a lot of time because you know which company, big companies are invested here, but I study a little bit some opportunity that wait you here. So first of all, IT infrastructure and all IT related service, we have a big gap because we have here around 30,000 graduated in IT or STEM in general, and the demand is I mean, we have 45,000 of graduated and 75,000 of demand. So we have a gap of around 30,000 people working in IT services. So it's a big opportunity for companies, foreign companies with this competence that want to enter in the market, offering even from remote these services. Healthcare or telemedicine. is a very huge sector here. I would like to share the case of Dr. Consulta. Dr. Consulta is a kind of low-cost health provider and has become an unicorn because he offers telemedicine in a very innovative model that Brazilian people like. Any kind of tech, I mean agri-tech, fintech, ed-tech, so I would like to share here the biggest digital bank called the Nubank. More or less the value is $30 billion of bank. This year, Nubank issued more credit card than the biggest traditional bank in all Latin America, Itaú. So this kind of sector, we have more than 400 fintech here. And we are remembering that we have 40 million people without bank account. So it's very interesting because they have access in 4G, 5G, I mean mobile, but they don't have a bank account. One moment, because okay. So agriculture, of course, is very interesting because Brazil has a very big space, like all the Spain and Portugal cultivated here, and they have appetite to technology in agriculture. For example, historically Brazil imported drone from China. Now there are 4 companies in Brazil producing drone, and the most important point is that are a kind of a working drone for agriculture. So they start with this technology, and it's very interesting. They have appetite for 4.0 technology, Internet of Things, and they are ready to implement it because also in agriculture, the people are very interested in this. So new products are very welcome. Clean tech and renewable energy, another big sector that attract investment. The matrix, the energy matrix in Brazil nowadays is 80% clean. I mean hydro, solar, and wind. So it's a very interesting market, growing double digit every year. And finishing, media and digital service, huge market. E-commerce also is a business that is growing double digit every day, before, during, and now after the pandemic. Also Amazon invested here to take this opportunity. In terms of machinery and equipment, Brazil historically is not a producer, so they import from Korea, Germany, Italy, US. They import equipment because they produce a very small quantity of machinery and equipment. And finally, electric vehicle, because historically they import from China some products, but now they want to produce here. They want collaboration. They want to develop better this sector with partnership, with joint venture with foreign company. They don't want only to import. This is the idea. I think that is interesting. Share this sector for you as well. The final sector is smart cities. We have already in Brazil 3 or 4 smart cities up and running. It's a very interesting concept because they developed fast here this kind of concept, and not only for rich people but also for poor people. So it's very interesting as a field. Finally, I studied a little bit. I would like to share some Brazilian unicorn because it's interesting. These are the historical unicorn in Brazil. In 2021, Brazil also had some unicorn here that I would like to show. But after that I study what's happening in India and the evolution of unicorn in India, I became very interested in this, and also I study the company that have become unicorn only in 2021 in India, and I found this very, very interesting because I see cross-selling between this expertise and this experience in India with the Brazilian market. So I finished my first part, and I hope, respecting the time, I have here my check, and I pass to the second part. That means how to do business in such complex market as Brazil. So I already explained that we are here since 15 years, and we manage more than 50 cases, 15 investment here. So we understand more or less what we need to do. And in this chart, we can share all the steps that are very important before invest, and we will try to go a little bit deeper in this. First of all, the idea of a profit and loss that a normal CEO, CFO, general manager, investor want to perform when invest here. So starting from sales and maybe producing something here or import some from abroad here, have a gross margin management, the operation, perform a good EBITDA, and finally, of course, generate cash, because this is the most important part. We cannot produce EBITDA, and after we are not able to produce cash, and finally distribute to the shareholder, because this is the most important point. And when we distribute from Brazil, we have zero withholding tax to India. This is very important. So start from the cost of goods, because sales is obvious, we need to sell, and we don't talk here about sell, but we try to understand a little bit better how we can import some final product or some good that after we transform here, or we use to transform the final product here in Brazil. The best point here is try to reduce the FOB price, respecting the transfer price, so we can gain in competitiveness, and after that we perform in Brazil, we distribute the dividend. This is the best way out, the most efficient operation. I will talk after a little bit more. There is a common knowledge here. So does Brazil has a very expensive import cost? It's not really. This chart show that it seems that Brazil is high. Also, India is not cheap. But when we go deep the importation process, we can understand that we have 5 tax when you import something here. But if you open a branch in Brazil, 4 tax out of 5 are recoverable. So if you have a branch here, you will pay only the import duty and not the other tax. And in this only technical slide that I would like to share with you, I will give you an example of a real importation. Try to imagine to export, in this case, an electrical appliance. So we have a $50 or €50 value FOB. If you don't have branch, you need to put in India your margin there, because after that you sell, the Brazilian do the rest. So you need to have the margin on top. This is wrong, but try to imagine that you sell in 15. This importation will tax it with all these import tax, EPI, ECM. I mean, the 5 tax that I mentioned before, as well shipping and insurance. And it seems that the $50 or €50 arrive here in Brazil are more than the double price. This is wrong, because if you open a branch, you can recover this tax, you can recover these taxes. Also, you can have a big saving, and more or less, you can have the same product here at 68 and not at 104. So remember what we said. We need to reduce the FOB price. In this case, when we have a branch here, I don't need to put the margin in the $50 there, because after my branch in Brazil perform the margin, so I have a double benefit. So the price will not 68, but will be lower. And after, I can distribute the dividend any month, each quarter, or 1 for years. So in this way, this is a good operation, in my opinion. So after that, we have a gross margin. Let's have a look in G&A cost. We need to hire people. We need to implement the operation in Brazil. Brazil is very different from Europe, US, I don't know, from India, but people here have a cultural habit of making purchases out of their purchasing power. They spend the salary before they receive. So it's very interesting to split the target, the objective, the bonus of people, and pay the right value to pay the bills at home and have a good life. And at the end of the year, try to give the incentive. The labor market in Brazil is complicated as well, because Brazil is famous for being the only 5-time football champion in the world, but unfortunately also the world championship in labor lawsuit. So it's very interesting to organize the people in Brazil in a proper way. So we have 2 or 3 solutions to implement compliant with the law and to avoid after labor lawsuit. As well, we need to focus in protecting our IP. Try to imagine that you participate in a trade show. In São Paulo, we have basically a trade show one per week in all sectors. So try to imagine that you are participating in a trade show. You want to expose, you want to show your technology, your ideas, your product. So it's very interesting before protect, because after Brazilian can copy your solution. And finally, so we again try to investigate. After that we perform a good EBITDA with these good ideas, I need to manage tax. So Paulo Guedes is our Minister of Economy, and in this speech he said, Brazil, it's a madness, it's a madhouse in terms of tax. And it's really why? Because in this slide of the World Bank, you can see the average, the world average of about time spent to file tax. Here, the world average is more or less 233 hours. India spent 252, so more or less is in average. And Brazil spend 1,500. So we need to focus at the beginning about tax, because after we will have the profit, we will have the good result. Brazil has 2 profit system, a real profit system, so revenue less cost means EBITDA, and we tax the EBITDA, or presumed profit system. Even we have a restriction, because we can apply this only if my turnover is less than 78 million reais, around $40 million. Which kind of system is this? We tax only the gross revenue of the company, and we don't see the cost. It's an interesting operation, but take care, because companies can choose the tax system once per year. So finally, it's crucial to protect our transaction from the fluctuation of the exchange rate. We have banks and solutions to protect this. It's very important. And just a recap, we understood that we need to manage production or import in a good way. We need to manage the G&A cost and people in a good way. We need to understand better tax to perform well, protect the exchange rate. And finally, again, try to distribute the result to India. Remember that since 1992, we have a bilateral income tax treaty signed between Brazil and India. So doing Brazil in India, final consideration. Brazil seems easy, but it's difficult indeed, but it's worth. These are my final word, and I hope that this presentation was useful for you and for our audience. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you so much, Mr. Misano. I think Misana. I think it's the presentation gives quite a succinct idea about the investment opportunities, taxation, and also on the ways in which you can have a successful business operation in Brazil. I now request Mr. Adler Martins, legal advisor to the India-Brazil Chamber of Commerce, to talk about the opening formats for companies in Brazil. Over to you, Mr. Martins.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, Virat. Thanks to India-Brazil Chamber of Commerce for the opportunity. I greet Mr. Eshok, Mr. Graziano, both excellent panels, presentations. I have been part of events like this since I was in college 20 years ago, and they do have a huge impact because business between Brazil and India have been growing a lot. I would know, I have been representative and lawyer to many Indian companies, some very big ones, oil, for example, Baiju's, both in mining and software sectors, a lot of sectors. And one of the first events I participated was actually in Rio. And after the event, I took the whole people from India to see Cristo Redentor, you know, the statue from Jesus Christ in Rio. It was a very nice moment. They loved it. Okay, I'd like to just make a short remark. Mr. Ishak talked about labor law in Brazil. It's in fact a problem. You see that Mr. Graziano also mentioned it. It's a very important topic. Also, Mr. Graziano brushed this issue, and I'd like to stress that having a local presence in Brazil is very important. Brazilians do not like to do business with companies that do not have people here all the time. So I know some Indian companies would rather send someone here for 3 months or 6 months and test the waters, but it doesn't work like that. You have to have at least one person here. Brazilians still like this, even with the pandemic, they like to go to an office, they like to have a local number to call. It's very important in our culture, and it does have an impact. So today I'll be talking about the basics of incorporating a company in Brazil, starting from the basic structures, and I'll also talk about how to send funds and capital equity loans to Brazil. So Brazil has two. I'm not going to use slides. I'll just have a chat with you. Of course, you can ask questions in the chat. So Brazil has two basic corporate structures. One is called the limited liability company. It's very similar to the American LLC, so a very standardized model in the world. And the other one is the corporation, which we call Sociedade Anônima, very close also to the US corporation or company by shares. There used to be a huge difference between them regarding the number of directors. So the Limitada could have 1 director, and the SCA would have to have at least 2. But it now has changed since this year. And also we have had a good development that in the corporation, the Sociedade Anônima, the director of the corporation can now live abroad. This was not possible. So all directors of Brazilian companies had to live in Brazil, to reside in Brazil, to have a permanent visa and local residence here. This is still the case for the limited liability company. But for the Sociedade Anônima, the corporation now, the director could, for example, live in India and be the director of the company in Brazil. The director would have to name a representative in Brazil, like would have to issue a power of attorney to someone here. That could be a lawyer, or could be an accountant or a business partner, but he could be the director and live abroad. This is always a problem with Asian investors, Indian, Chinese, Japanese, because they'd like to have more control over the company, and they were forced to have a local director. It now has been changed. The problem is the limited liability company is still easier to incorporate because the articles for the company are simpler and it's less costly. The corporation has this advantage of having a non-resident director, but it's still a little bit more complex to incorporate. The articles are more complex. There are more regulations, more reporting obligations, this kind of thing. That's the reason why most Indian companies that come to Brazil will start incorporating as a limited liability company, and they will name a local director for maybe 3-6 months. It's usually the accountant, for example, Mr. Graziano could do that. I do that sometimes. It also could be someone from the Indian Chamber of Commerce or some business partner who will be the manager of the company, the local director for a few months, until the Indian company can make a decision if he's sending an actual employee to Brazil or if he's going to keep the local director here. So this is always something that generates some oddness. It's weird, right, for the Indian investor having to have a local person in Brazil, but this is the case. Brazilian system is very connected to having people here. Another topic that's also everybody asks me about a lot is why we have to have a Brazilian accountant for the company. So this is actually mandatory. When you have a Brazilian company, even a small one, you must have a local, either an accounting firm or an accountant here in Brazil, licensed to be an accountant in Brazil. Of course, we have the big four, have large accounting companies, but we also have mid-size and small-size accounting companies that can help a lot and are not so expensive. The reason you need to have an accountant in Brazil or an accounting firm, well, the first one is because it's a law, we cannot get around that. But the second one is because the accountant will actually help you with a lot of tax obligations, especially reporting obligations. Things that you usually don't think about, but in Brazil, a company has to provide between 3 and 5 mandatory reports each month for different agencies of the government. So the accountant will be taking care of that while you do your business, okay? So if you don't have a good one, you may have a lot of problems, but sometimes you can have a very good one for a price that is It's not so high, and it saves a lot of trouble. Well, whenever we are incorporated, so those two are the main questions I get all the time. So do I have to have a local director? In most of the cases, yes. And do I have to have a local accountant? Yes, absolutely, you must have one. Another question I get a lot is about the procedure, about the papers, right? Mr. Eshak mentioned about it. Is it hard to get the documents done, legalization, translation? So it used to be very, very hard. It used to take 6 months to have the company up and running, but now it's much better. We have had a lot of small steps towards having the companies faster. So it was a lot of small improvements, but it has now come together, and it's much better. So for example, Brazil and India are now members of the Apostille Convention, the Hague Apostille Convention, which means that the documents from one country do not have to go through the consulate to be valid in the other company. I'm sorry, in the other country. You can just go through the Hague legalization process, which is much easier. And as far as I understand, sometimes even less expensive. So this is very good. This has improved things a lot. I know some Indian companies, they invest in Brazil through Singapore, but Singapore is now also a member of the Apostille Convention. So we are covered on that side. Mandatory translations have to be done in Brazil. They used to be sworn translations. Now the law has been changed and it has been made more flexible. They are just public translations. The pool of translators has increased a lot. And also the translation straight from electronic documents has now also started to be accepted. So in the past, we'd have to mail the hard copies, get them translated here, then get the translation in hard copy, take to the government. Now we can start translation. As soon as we have legalization, we can translate from PDF files and then issue, and then prepare a PDF dossier and use that to go to the corporate registry. So this has saved like 1 or 2 months just in that step. So things have gotten a lot better. So basically today, when you have to incorporate a company, we'll discuss the details of the articles, if it's a limited liability company or a corporation. We'll check those details about directors, that kind of thing. We'll draft the whole document. We will ask for PDF copies of the documents from India. We'll get them translated, and everything is made electronically, directly with the corporate registry and with the Brazilian Central Bank. I have had a case in which I could open a company in about 20 days. It was kind of fast. I cannot promise it to always be between 15 and 20 days, but it's getting more and more common to have them in 30 days or less. I mean, within 1 month. And this is very, very good. Another question I get a lot is how to send money to the company. Now, Brazil, it's actually not so hard. The problem is you can only send money after the Brazilian company has a bank account. So this is the key point. You have to incorporate the company in Brazil, and the company has to have a local bank account with a bank in Brazil. I advise it to be with a bank. In theory, you could have a kind of account with an electronic bank or even a payment service like PayPal or many other competitors. But for capital infusion, a bank will work better. What's the problem? So a lot of times the Indian investor is not comfortable in having the local manager who has to live in Brazil operate the bank account. So they would avoid having the bank account. We can add some limitations to the articles to get around that. And also today, many banks, HSBC, for example, Citibank, and others, they have an account that allows approval from India. So you can have a system in place in which you will approve the payments, from India. So you'll have 2 approvals, Brazil and India. So it helps a lot also. And also in the past, any company, even a Brazilian company with foreign investors, would have a hard time opening a bank account. This is just pure bureaucracy. There were no laws in place to make it harder than it should be. But the banks were not used to, that's the truth. They were not used to getting foreign investment. But foreign investment in Brazil in the last 20 years has exploded, not only in value, but in the number of transactions. So in the past, you would only have like very large multinational companies, but now it's very common to have software companies and small business, medium-sized business, importers, all kinds of Indian business coming to Brazil, not only Indian, Chinese, American. And now this has elevated the professional level of the banks, and it's now much easier to open the bank account. You will wire the funds via a common SWIFT transaction to Brazil. You have to wire the equity according to what you declared in the articles of the company. You can also do loans to the Brazilian company. Both are permitted, and both have to be registered with the Brazilian Central Bank. But it's an electronic registration, so basically you send the money to the bank, and you do in separate, in parallel, a registration with the Brazilian Central Bank. This system has also been updated, so it's much easier now than it has been in the past. The main problem I see when we are incorporating in Brazil is lack of planning. So for example, the Indian company will send a person here to try to incorporate by himself. And then when he comes here, he'll go talk to a few accountants. And then all these things I'm talking to you now, he'll have to discover on the spot. So the best thing to do is just call someone earlier. Before you send someone here, you make a call, and you can do everything electronically, sometimes in about 20 to 30 days. So it has improved a lot. I know it's not like US or UK where you can open a company in one day. Maybe it will never reach that level, but it's manageable now, okay? It's 1 month for Brazil is not considered too long for any bureaucratic procedure of this kind, I mean, investment funds, companies, etc. Now, Mr. Graziano has talked about having a subsidiary in Brazil and how it's better to have a subsidiary to do imports. And I'd like to stress also that I have a lot of Indian clients who sell software in Brazil. Brazil has a lot of import taxes on software as well, software, technical services, that kind of thing. But if you do a co-development of the software in Brazil via a local branch or local subsidiary, taxation can be reduced by a lot, sometimes by 90, 95%. This is for both software as a service, software and technical services. So what I've been seeing the most in the last 5 years is using the local subsidiary, the local branch, as a co-developer of software so that you can invoice the softwares locally in Brazil and then just remit the profits to India. This also works like a charm, works very well. It may be changed in the future, but for now, it's kind of a loophole where you can do a lot of software development and sell them in Brazil without paying almost nothing on import tax over software, okay? The technical term actually is not import taxes. It's income tax, federal income tax over imported services. But I'm calling it import tax just to make it easier, okay? Another topic I'd like to talk about, Mr. Ashok talked about privatizations and some very large public projects. Brazil is actually very open when it comes to railroads, ports, and even roads, toll booths, infrastructure, hydropower, electricity. All those projects can be managed or can receive foreign investment. The main restrictions we have in Brazil is actually to the purchase of agricultural land. So if an Indian company wants to buy a large quantity of land in Brazil, it's not permitted. But in this year, we have just created what we call industrial agropecuary funds or industrial agriculture funds, which are investment funds. You know, they are listed in the Brazil Stock Exchange. And through those funds, a foreign investor could purchase land in Brazil. So this is a new thing that's coming along. It did not exist in the past, but I forecast, and everybody sees, that in the future there will be some competition in Brazil between Chinese, Indian, and American investors regarding those kinds of projects, you know, regarding not only infrastructure, but agricultural land and production, ports, river ports, all those topics. Well, I think we may have a lot of questions, so I'll end here. I hope this was informative for you. And again, thank you all for the attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Martins. Thank you so much all for your inputs, and they have been clearly very informative for Indian companies who are looking to enter Brazil. And I think the crux is the sentence you talked about, the lack of planning. I think it's better to plan well ahead of actually making an entry into the Brazilian market, and that is a point well taken. Some questions which have come up from the audience, I think one of them is about the Brazilian fiscal calendar being aligned with the Indian fiscal calendar. Can it be done and how can it be done? So who would like to take that up? Okay, Mr. Messana.
Yes, if I can reply, but the Brazilian calendar,
Please.
fiscal tax calendar is from January to December. But of course, in terms of management reports, we are able to adapt with international standards. And if the dates are different, we can issue management report according to the calendar of each country. So the official tax calendar is January to December, and we cannot change this local requirement. But of course, we are able to adapt the management report according to the different dates that we can have in countries abroad. In any ways, a balance sheet here follows EFS rule more or less, as well US GAAP. I mean, this is not, the Brazilian financial statement is not so far nowadays from the international standards. So we are able to issue report in English and are very aligned with international standards.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Messana. Another question is, how much easier is it to trade in Brazil or do business in Brazil, let's say, related to that, as compared to the past? So what would you say are the major factors which have changed in the last 10 years, which investors should know? Who would like to take that up?
I think I can take that.
Okay, so Mr. Martins.
As I mentioned, Brazil has been accumulating good steps. So, for example, since the last 3 years, most of the communication with the government is now electronic. So when you have to import something, the process is basically electronic. When you have to, for example, file for a company, incorporate a company, it's everything electronic in, I think now all states now. It used to be most, but now I think in all states. We have had the number of stamps and legalizations, notarizations we have to present has been reduced by a lot. So the system is still complex. I mean, the tax system is still complex, for example, but one of the main difficulties we had in the past was actually dealing with hard copies. 5 years ago, even to import things to Brazil, you'd have to collect like maybe 10 or 15 sheets of paper, a lot of paper, really. And now it's mostly electronic, and it has improved a lot. So I'd say that on the practical aspects, it's way better now. The regulatory system is still not perfect. It needs a lot of improvement, but it's definitely easier now than it was even 2 or 3 years ago.
Right. Also, Sethi sir had talked about some of the visa challenges. So could you shed some light on that? Any of the Mr. Messana, Mr. Martins?
I will. I think Mr. Graziano can comment on the values, that kind of thing. But one thing I'd like to say is that the Indian system for marriage registration and that kind of thing is a little bit different from the Brazilian system. I have had some experiences in which the person's birth certificate was in a small town, maybe 400 kilometers from New Delhi, and they had to get a copy. There was no centralized system. I understand now it's getting more and more centralized and electronic, so things are getting better. But in the past, I've had this problem in which the person lost his marriage certificate and he could not issue a new one, because I don't know specifically what happened, but I think that the notary public that had issued the original one had died or had not been replaced yet. So in Brazil, the system is more centralized via what we call cartórios, which are essentially public agencies that record and keep all kinds of, they act as a notary public, but as like a blockchain, right? They have all the documents there forever. So it's very hard to explain in Brazil when you have a difference in that kind of system. But what I have been seeing lately, and of course, people are now younger, they have married earlier, just a few years ago, and now it's much easier to get the documents ready, including criminal certificates and all that. So there are problems, but they are being solved.
Thank you, Mr. Martins. There's one question. I mean, what kind of tax reforms do you think are most important or being pursued in Brazil at the moment, which will make it more attractive to foreign investors. So what's the, let's say the discussion going on at present? And what would, even if you would like to say, some things which are very important and need to be done according to you? Mr.
Adele, do you
Misana?
want to? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
No, I think that in this case we are in an event called "How to Expand Your Business in Brazil." So we need to understand the opportunity of Brazil and understand also that in 2017 Brazil had a very interesting tax reform in labor, and also we had an administrative reform. And now Brazil are discussing the tax reform. But remember that in next October 2022 we will have the election. So I don't think that in next year this is the most important point in terms of attractiveness of investment in Brazil, because the next tax reform could change, for example, the taxation on dividend, for example, in Brazil, on something similar. But from a point of view of a foreign investor, I found Brazil during this pandemic a country able to attract, because we performed several startups during the pandemic. So we have investors from US, from Europe that never been visited Brazil. And we launched the company for them. We perform business. We manage as local director on behalf of this investment, the foreign investment here. They investment also from Swiss and Switzerland. And now they are planning to visit Brazil after 1 year that they develop remotely the opportunity here, and now they come. And then we will manage also the advisors project, because when you have a local company here that manage the business, and you can control that, you can control bank account, you can control the activity of the local director that act on behalf of the foreign investor, you can sit there. It's not relevant if you come here. So when the investor come here, we will eat finally a good picanha, a good Brazilian food together and commemorate with the caipirinha. But I mean that we are in 2021. It's a global economy where in a digital country as Brazil, all is allowed even remotely. So I'm very happy about this. And for this reason, I think that this is the main point today, not the future tax reform that probably change something, but nothing of relevant.
I want to ask a question. Would it be okay, Virat?
Yes, sir, please.
Yes, we just now, I think we talked about, tax and everything, and we talked about, but Adler, what we were talking of, and I think we missed the point, was the challenge of visas, because the promoters here, the people who approach us from the trade, they say that even if 90% of the employees are from Brazil, at least 10% would go from India, and they would have to have work permits. Then you have managers, CEOs who, you may talk about remote control, but the Indians believe that their own man should be sitting there. I'm sure you have this experience. So now, if you're looking at India, what is this visa challenges which we have? No one has addressed this one.
Okay, I can address this in a very simple way. We have a company with 500 people here. It's a foreign company. And when you ask a visa as an employee, right? Employee, you the Minister of Labor has 30 days to reply. So the main point is to collect the proper document, as Mr. Adler said before, because if I need to demonstrate that the guy is born in a typical city in India, he need to give me the certificate of birth. So if we have a problem on top, of course we have after a problem at the end of the process. But formally, we performed in these 15 years a lot of visa, and the Ministry of Labor has 30 days to reply. You cannot avoid to reply when you apply. So the problem is on top. how can I apply and prepare a good documentation in order to avoid problem during the process of visa. So I'm very comfortable on this, unless the documentation that come from abroad is, of course, poor, or we miss some important document. This is my opinion, okay? And we have a lot of experience we can manage after a single case. And normally the cost is 6 to 7,000 real for the whole process, and the visa is delivered 30 days after they apply.
Okay, so I'll just share my experience of the Middle East, where again a lot of Indians have opened businesses, and you know, there they also work on remote control, whereas also their people are there. The visa process is as follows. You give a passport copy. If you're going to be working there, you have to give your graduation certificate duly notarized by the ministry of both the countries. And then once these documents, this work permit is issued, once you have copy of the passport and you have your graduation certificate, you have to be a graduate to be employed as a manager, and below manager, you can have a lesser degree. Now, once these two are there, if you're married, you have to give your marriage certificate, notarized, of course, and legalized by both the embassies. Period. This is all.
And also, you need the letter of the company of you working in the last.
Of course. The recommendation there. Period.
No, it's not a recommendation. It's one or just.
No, it's an employment letter. It's an employment letter saying that you are hereby employed. So
I'd like to. I'm sorry.
Yeah, is this the process there also, or is there something more to it?
This is the process.
Okay.
Let me just clarify two things. There are two main types of visa. One is the employee visa, Mr. Graziano talked about very well, and the second one is a director or official visa.
That is easier. Yes.
Yeah, which is easier. Yes.
Which is
so
easier.
For most companies, what I would recommend is that when they have to send a local manager or director, they use the investor visa, right?
Exactly.
But the investor visa has a minimum investment of, it's today's $90,000 per director. So for example, it's 500,000 reais. So for example, you have to have this money in Brazil, paid in equity in Brazil. And based on that, you can request a director visa, which usually goes even faster than the employment visa. So for example, if you want to have 2 or 3 directors here, you have to have maybe 270, less than $300,000 in investment here. Of course, this limits the size of the company. The very small ones cannot do it. But for medium-sized company, this is usually not so hard. About the documents, what I feel is happening here is Mr. Graziano, what he's saying is right. So for example, if you get all the documents perfectly, we can have them sometimes in 30 days. The problem is the list of documents in Brazil is kind of extensive. There are also some, for example, they want a criminal certificate of the cities where you lived in the last, 5 years. So maybe the person has lived in 2-3 cities. And it's very boring and taxing on the person presenting the documents. So sometimes what we get a lot is resistance from the Indian side on presenting so many documents, or sometimes the person will not prepare all of them because he thinks things will slip through even if we're missing 1 or 2. So this is one of the small problems I was talking about Brazilian bureaucracy, but we have to go through with it.
Yes,
so
but
that means the director, if he wants to come, there has to be an investment. Otherwise, he can't come. Whereas in other countries, it is not like that. You get a simple, one is called a business visa, which is a little more expensive than the normal visa. And that's it. I mean, a director may not be having a work permit, but he can have a visit business visa. Now, is that also a problem?
Brazil is, before we could have non-resident directors until last year, it was a huge problem. Now for corporations, we can have non-resident directors, as I mentioned. And so things have improved a lot. Brazil is very protective of its internal labor market. So I don't think it will change anytime soon that the company can bring, 5 or 10 directors without having investment.
No, just visiting, business visit.
Yeah, for a business visit, you can get the business visa for 2 or 3 months. It's like a tourist visa. It's relatively easy to get, but there's no pushback on that. The problem is when the person wants to come to Brazil and have executive power in the company, and then he will need this special kind of visa.
If you want to visit Brazil and to business and stay less than 90 days, it's very easy. It's very fast, and without nothing is requested to come here unless a simple letter. So you can, when you arrive, you will receive a stamp in your passport as or tourist or business visit, and you can stay here 3 months. The main point is people that come here with this kind of visas, and after they want to open bank account, they want to rent an house, they want to basically work or perform some work experience here, receiving money. This is wrong. They cannot work here without a regular work visa. But we have several cases of C-level that visit Brazil 3, 4, 5 times per year. They don't need a visa for this. They come here, spend 2 weeks, 1 week, 3 weeks, visit their branches here, and this is very common. So we need to be clear that if you decide to move to Brazil, to put your family here, to open a bank account, to have a local document issued from Brazil government, you need to have a full visa. And I think it's right that the Brazilian government check if your criminal position abroad, it's okay. Brazil doesn't want criminal from abroad. I think it's a kind of understandable point of view. Means more bureaucracy, yes, but it's not so. You can do business here without visa unless you want to receive money here, basically, in a short consideration.
If I can point,
that's true.
One more thing, which I think happens a lot, is a lot of foreigners, when they come to Brazil, they get mystified and confused because some things in Brazil are very easy to do. For example, if you want to have you don't have to schedule with a lawyer with 1 week anticipation. You can just call him. He will talk to you right away. So some things are super easy to do. Some things are very hard to do. For example, to get the proper visa. So when people come, they get confused, and sometimes they interpret that something that's hard is in fact prohibited. As Mr. Graziano mentioned, when a person comes to Brazil to a short visit, but then he wants to open a bank account, he will face a lot of bureaucracy. It's not prohibited, but it's hard to do. So sometimes those stories filter back to India as if Brazil prohibited things. But that's not the case. When you plan right, things go very smoothly. As I mentioned, I opened a company here the other day in 20 days.
That's good. That's good. And thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Totally welcome.
Thank you. I think we came to a very interesting discussion towards the end of the session. And well, I think there are a lot of questions, but at this stage, I would request the audiences that since due to shortage of time, we need to close now. Before I close, I would like to also inform everyone that on the YouTube link where this webinar is live, you can fill in your information. There is a form which has been created. You can fill in your contact information, your business information. And if you do that, you will be getting a participation certificate as well. So with that, I would respectfully like to bring the session to a close. Thank you so much, Mr. Graziano Massana, Mr. Adler Martins, Ashok Sethi sir, Natalia. Thank you so much for being a part of this session. And I think it's been a good beginning for companies who really, would have been blank on what Brazil is about, what it offers. And also perhaps, it has helped address some of those concerns which Indian companies have expressed. So I thank you all once again for this very interesting discussion. And we hope that this will lead to more positive beginnings, more positive collaborations in the future for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. It was an honor.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You all.